All right, welcome to the June 30th Arborist call. The agenda is pretty standard. Quick little intro. We do some implementation updates from the node implementers, the foundation with Zhd and ECC with Zcashd. And then anyone else that happens to be on the call doing any kind of protocol development, more than happy for them to provide an update as well. We have a discussion period where we dig into deeper topics. Currently, if I didn't see any specific ones requested, so we can we'll just leave that open for now. If there's anything anyone wants to bring up, we can, related to protocol dev. And if not, then we'll give everyone a few minutes back today. Arborist calls are all about protocol. So it's about protocol R&D, design, implementation, network activations, etc. New features, blockers, unresolved issues. The purpose is to make it more accessible for people and to provide more transparency. So if you can't be on this call, you can definitely go back and watch it on the YouTube channel or check out the notes that Jason is taking as we go. Anyone can participate. Obviously, you can just register and hang out, ask questions in the chat, raise your hand, ask questions, to the people that are on the call. If there's something you'd like to see discussed at a future Arborist call, you can just reach out to me, let me know. And we will, meeting every 2 weeks like we do, we typically have plenty of time to work in most anything anyone would like to chat about. Ways to get involved besides Arborist calls. There's Zcash community grants, which is one of the 3 recipients of the Dev Fund. And zcashcommunitygrants.org is their website. Information is there on the type of things they're interested in funding or how to apply if you have an idea for something that maybe might not necessarily even be in that list. They're definitely open to fielding any and all applicants and interest in Zcash, and we really appreciate the work that they do. We've also established a grant program with the Filecoin Foundation. You can get more details on that by emailing either one of those 2 addresses, or you could actually email me, Stephen@electriccoin.co. We have the R&D Discord as well. So if you're interested in protocol development, either as a participant or just keeping up and asking questions, etc., you can pop into that Discord. More than happy to have anyone and everyone we can get in there. That's what makes it a much richer community space for all of us. So, as Dodger mentioned earlier today, and right before we started recording the call, get out the vote. If you're a ZCAP member, you should have in your email an email from about Helios voting. Check your spam folder if you don't see it. But it's essentially a vote on a single member of the Zcash community grants to add them to the team. That's what it looks like. You should vote now. The election technically ends 9 a.m. UTC, but do not wait on that because that will sneak up on you before you know it. And that's UTC. So that's typically, if you're in the US, that's multiple hours ahead. So it would be definitely middle of the night for anyone in the US for the most part. So, okay. All right, very good. Moving forward, Zhd update. Conrad, are you going to do that this week?
Yep.
Okay. And I can leave this up, or you can share your screen, whatever you'd prefer.
You can leave it up. Thank you.
Okay.
So a couple days ago, we released beta 12, Zebra. We had some breaking changes. We now delete old cached states because the way Zebra works, when we change the database format to something like that, we just, instead of migrating the data, we just sync back from Genesis. But every time that happens, the old database would be left on the disk, and that can be weird for users because it starts to take up a lot of space. So now Zebra deletes the old cached states in database. We don't enable by default some features like tracing and metrics, just because they are optional and you don't need to actually compile them if you don't need them. So if you need them, you now need to actually actively enable them and compiling. And there was also a small change in the config file format when you need to specify a period of time. Before you needed to specify the number of seconds and milliseconds, it was weird. And now we just write them as, for example, like a human format. and it will accept that. We had some issues with sync speed because recently there has been both a large number of transactions and some transactions with a large number of orchard actions, and those were taking a long time to verify, and this was resulting in Zebra not being able to sync at all. So we did some adjustments with timeouts and number of parallel jobs, stuff like that, and now it's working. But we also incorporated the new recent Halo 2 crate release, which also improved performance a little bit. But the biggest change will be something that we are working on is actually supporting batching verification for Halo 2 proofs. So when we do have that, the performance will be probably much better. We also had to make some CI improvements also due to this issue, because GitHub Actions has a 6-hour timeout for each job, and Zebra was syncing in 5 hours and 55 minutes. But with those blocks, it became more than that, so we had to split the sync job into different jobs to work around the timeout. It's not working. Some documentation improvements, and we also now reject peers listening to the parts that Flux use, right, to avoid issues, because we already had issues from DNS, and now we also don't connect to those peers in Zebra. And we also prefer, when choosing peers, we prefer peers using the canonical parts of the cache. And that's it.
All right, very good. Thank you. Zcashd update. The next thing up for us is Zcashd Release 5.10. We're targeting next week, having that out. A few things to highlight that we'll include in there. A few of these we mentioned last time, they'd already merged at that point. You could just categorize it as some build system improvements. We integrated CXX.rs into the build system. That kind of replaces, handcrafted FFI layers between Rust and C++ with something that's a little more automated. Also integrated cargo vet into the build system for kind of Rust like dependency trust verification, if you will. Other big things in the release, we rework the reindex rescan logic a bit. So wallet RPCs now block until reindex and rescan are complete. The reason we did that, no particular failure, but you could absolutely get some erroneous results back. For example, there was one partner we work with that was doing, at some point in the rescan, a Zget balance. And because of the way things were initialized, it was showing that their balance was basically half of all issuance, like 7 million something Zec. So they were A, happy, B, confused, and obviously C, disappointed when they realized they didn't have 7 million Zec. But anyway, we did that. And then we also made it where rescan will now only kick off once reindex is completed. Previously, reindex and rescan were actually totally separate functions. So reindex was not a superset that included rescan, but we kind of adjusted the logic so that it essentially is at this point. We improved zget tree state performance. That's one of the RPCs. That's honestly not as much of an issue after NU5 activated as it was before. But nonetheless, we have that code in there. It's merged. We, as I mentioned before, get raw transaction and decode raw transaction. We did not have the orchard details in specifically for that. Where that would show up primarily is block explorers trying to identify like number of orchard actions in a transaction, for example. Definitely not the sender, receiver, or amount, of course, but the little bit of info they needed for block explorer when looking at an individual transaction. And then the last one should have been the first one because it's arguably the biggest. Batch verification of orchard proofs. As Conrado mentioned, after NU5 activated, roughly about 2.5 weeks ago or so, I lose the exact date, we started seeing a tremendous number of orchard transactions coming through, sometimes as many as 500 a block. which was pretty high, and higher than honestly shielded transaction activity that we'd seen before. The verification time for that block was about for a block of that size was roughly 2.5 seconds. We've reduced that time by, I think 81% is the last number that I saw. So it'd be roughly half a second now to do, to do that same amount. So we made a number of optimizations. One, is obviously batch verification, which speeds that up. Kind of an interesting data point. It's something I asked because I wasn't super familiar with it. If we had seen the same number of like sapling transactions with the current, like sapling, I guess, architecture, how long would that have taken? And it would have been roughly about 7 seconds, a little over, to do that same number of sapling transactions. Now, caveat is we didn't do like batch verification on sapling. There was some optimizations we could have done and gotten that time down super low too if we needed to. But just kind of point of
Stephen,
reference.
don't give hints to denial of service attackers. It's fine. We could do sapling batch verification relatively easily if that happened.
Good point. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But we know how to fix it. Yeah, so we should probably do that at some point anyway. Okay, that is pretty much. So any questions? Let me check the chat. I don't think I saw anything pop up.
Congratulations to Zcashd for implementing that batch verification. It was me and Sean were involved as well, but Zcashd did most of the work. So
right.
Thank you.
No, yep, a great point. It was great work by Zcashd and Sean and Dara to really dig in. And kind of identify the opportunities for optimization of that amount. Zcashd also developed some benchmarks. If you look at that particular PR, there's a benchmark now that uses a particular block that has a large number of orchard transactions in it. So we have a benchmark we can track for future testing. Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments, or anyone on the ECC team want to add any context or additional info to any of these items, or anything else I might have missed?
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We upstreamed batch maps for Groth16 into Bellman a while ago. Is Zcashd not using that? We're using that to verify batches of Groth16 proofs.
Zcashd is not using that.
Oh, okay, cool. That's
just because we haven't got around to it.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Deirdre. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, that was the node updates, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we didn't have any suggested topics or set agenda, so I'll kind of just open it up. If anybody has anything to add in, we mentioned the Zcap poll, so be sure and vote like right after this call if you haven't already. I do know Dodger wanted to introduce Gustavo, who the foundation hired to do some DevOps work, right, Dodger?
Yeah, Gustavo's been with us quite some time now. So
in December, right? Joined in December.
It was December. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's been kicking our CI infrastructure into shape. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of float, and this is just an idea, it may not be practical or reasonable, but I was wondering if it might be a good idea to do some knowledge sharing between ECC and Zf, and in fact maybe outside as well to other projects, especially any grant recipients, and maybe people like Ziggurat might be interested on how we do CI, how we do automated testing, the sort of tests that we run. I don't think we've really got into kind of proper benchmarking yet, but
right.
I know that you guys have, as you just mentioned. So I just wanted to float that and see what.
I think that would be useful.
I do too. I think it's a great idea actually, and it was even, I mean, it'd be a great idea in general, right? So no matter what, but I know within U5, for example, it would have been really great, honestly, if we shared test suites a little bit, right? So if we made a change to Zcashd, we could have just ran some like Zbd, basic tests, maybe not the full test suite, but we could have just verified, and vice versa. When you're making some changes, you'd have like maybe a subset of the test or whatever you could run, just to make sure that things still function right. So I like that idea quite a bit. I'm very supportive. Yeah.
And at the risk of volunteering Marshall and Gustavo, for, I was wondering if maybe after after they've corresponded a bit and met a few times and whatnot, maybe if it might be a good idea to do a kind of a sort of presentation type thing describing how we collectively and if there's any individual differences do this sort of thing, because I think good for our community and good for just generally other people who might be doing this sort of thing. But like I said, they might not. Might need a bit of prep before that. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's a really good idea.
Can't see their faces, so I can't see if they're going, "Oh no."
I see.
I was just trying to. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. I think it's a really good idea. Just to get some consistency across the stacks, and maybe even we were talking about this, I think, yesterday with our Git flow issue we were working with. Same kind of stuff came up. We were talking about like having essentially like a shim layer of tests. So it's like a test suite, if you look at it from a repo, that's kind of independent from a main repo, so that it can be ideally shared or in high flow, CIs. It's one less thing to worry about, but it gives folks the ability to test stuff kind of more independent from the code. So I think, having a conversation across team, even with Ziggurat folks in the community, and just bringing it all in and kind of finding common bases and flows. That's something we're already trying to do. So we're definitely open to new ideas or stuff we may have missed. So I think it'll be a good, fruitful conversation.
Okay. Cool. All right. You just want to kick that off. I was going to say, let's just get Gustavo and Marshall connected, and
let's do that.
I know Yasser's doing quite a bit. Yasser's not a super new hire for us, but recently joined the team within the past period of time, 6 months or so ish. I don't exactly remember the start date, but he's been doing quite a bit of work too, like on CI and upgrade we're doing there. And then we've got a number of people on the team doing some really cool things around testing too. So Marshall and Gustavo can get everyone connected that needs to connect, and that'd be great. I do remember too, we were last time we had Ziggurat on the call, we were looking at taking some of their tests and including those in like a test suite too. So that would be to have that kind of multi-node test suite and like a network level test suite, all kind of in one place. If you wanted to run it, could be really cool. In addition to people doing just other protocol development, maybe they're not doing a full node, for example, but they want to know that their work didn't impact a full node. So they would have access to that kind of test suite too. I think it would be an excellent idea, Dodger. Yeah. All right.
Well, I'll connect to them. So that's
cool.
That ball is rolling.
That's fun. All right, very good. And by the way, nice to meet you, Gustavo. I'm not sure.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all. Yeah, sure. I'll be here if you need anything. Dodger will put us in contact, but if there's anything that you'll need to know about the actual implementation, just let me know.
Okay.
Well, what time zone are you on?
UTC -4. So that's commonly New York time, commonly.
Cool.
Okay. All right.
I think you're on the same time zone as Yasser, now that I think about it.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too. Yeah. Cool. All right, very good. All right, anyone have anything else wanted to bring up, discuss? Oh, Taylor, there we go.
So I just maybe wanted to chat through a few of the details of the extra orchard load that we've been seeing on mainnet. So one thing that as Conrado said, one of the things that we're working on for Zebra at the moment is decreasing the number of blocks that we try to verify concurrently, because we were verifying hundreds of blocks, and that works fine when you've only got a few shielded transactions in there. But if you try to verify a few hundred blocks with 500 transactions each, that's actually a lot of RAM and a lot of CPU. And so we were timing out on some of those. So that change should be hopefully coming in our next release, not in the one that we've just had. Yeah, and hopefully when we get batching in, we can increase the default limit there. I was just wondering if anybody else had any other thoughts on how we should be working through that, or maybe even how we should be monitoring for these kinds of load incidents.
Strad, did you hear that? I know you just said you were back, but did you hear
I didn't. I only heard half of the question.
Okay.
Right. So one of them is, what do you think we should be, is there anything else we could be doing to speed up verification? Zebra has on its list verifying fewer blocks concurrently, and then also batching Orchard proofs. And then should we as a community or as node implementers be doing more to monitor the load on the network so that we can find out about these kinds of things earlier?
Can I answer the first question? So I think that especially to mitigate denial of service, both, well, any full node implementation should probably be capping the amount of memory that it's going to use for verification. So in other words, keep track of that, and if it's above a threshold, then don't use any more parallelism. So yeah.
I mean, as far as my side go, things I can think of goes, the main thing is, like, we need to be at a point where you know, full blocks are comfortably verifiable, and clearly with Orchard there's a bit more we need to do to get to that point. But as far as, like, because I know in Zebra's case you do a lot of full chain syncing, repetitive syncing, especially with, like you said, the config deletion, you just sync from scratch. So you're probably encountering more of the multi-block edges than we are in that case, particularly as we don't sync blocks in parallel.
So there are two approaches that you can take here. You can try and design for worst case blocks, but then if you make a mistake and a DOS attacker finds some block structure that is actually worse than your worst case, then they have an attack. Or you can try and dynamically deal with resource usage. So the suggestion of capping memory usage was in that category.
Yeah, I also don't know how much you do in terms of remembering verification states. I don't know what Zebra's internals are like for. So, like, if you see a transaction come in via the mempool and then again via blocks, do you, like, how much that verification gets cached?
So at the moment, we don't cache any verification results, but we could. And it would be possible for us to put a generic service in front of our verification that just returns the same result. The trick would be to capture the state of the chain at that point that the verification depended on, at which point we'd probably just capture the tip hash and redo it again if the tip hash happened to change.
Yeah, that's roughly what Zcashd ends up doing, where, like, in memory the transaction in the mempool can cache that verification state. but then the mempool state just gets reevaluated every time the tip changes. There's probably in your case with multi-tips, there's probably a more intelligent thing that the node could do to track like which subset of tips a mempool transaction could be valid in, and maintain the validity within that state, perhaps.
Yeah, the issue with caching in general is that it's not going to affect the worst case. So it's fine for general usage, but not for denial of service. Dodger had his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, purely for this specific topic, given the nature of it, is it worth having a private meeting to discuss the details of this sort of thing?
I mean, do you mean to avoid giving hints to an attacker?
Exactly. Given what you said earlier, Zara.
Yeah, you said something about it.
I was partly joking. I was mainly joking, actually, because I mean, an attacker could figure all of this stuff out. It's just that it seems like some of the attackers recently have been little more than script kiddies, to be honest. We're not dealing with people who are delving into the depths of the protocol and finding the worst case performance.
Yeah. That being said, it could be useful just to particularly for the
let's do it
like
anyway.
For certain things,
we
know the kinds of work, the kind of work that can be done to improve things here, and certainly like maybe something off channel for collaborating on those improvements could be useful.
And again, also maybe something that Ziggurat could be included in.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I hope I haven't annoyed the attacker to the extent that they sort of resume the attack. Never mind.
Script kiddie? You called me a script kiddie? No. You've just offended them.
They are, though.
Hey, Marshall, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think it was the second question Tier asked about, which was kind of like a common ground of rules or alerts or monitoring or how we catch the state across the ecosystem. I think that we should get to, that's kind of one of the things we were talking about, and it goes hand in hand with what Dodger was saying of bringing all the DevSecOps folks in together. I was kind of perfect world thinking that we could, since we're all on, I assume, Grafana, Loki, Prometheus stack more or less, and we've already been sharing dashboards. I think maybe the next step for situations like this would be maybe get a common like rule set, alerting set, so that we can build off of that, but at least folks could share this potentially in a test suite, just to have like sanity check references of what their infra may be seeing compared to others. But that's about as far as we've got for thinking how to better do that. But we're totally open to other ideas and things, and maybe we want to do something completely different. Because I know Ziggurat's done essentially what I just rambled about, but they've gone into all the cases with each node and things. So,
all right, good deal. Tayor?
Yes, so I used to work for the Tor project and worked a bit with their metrics team, and they actually have a public website that has automatically updated metrics for a bunch of pretty common things that are common for distributed systems, like number of nodes and volume of stuff and those kind of things. And I also worked as a researcher on Tor before that, and it was very, very helpful as a research resource. And so if we're looking to attract more researchers on, say, the reliability side of things, or even as something for other researchers to quote in terms of the volume of the network or the number of nodes, I think that monitoring is very, very useful. It's also something that I think would help us make better decisions for future network upgrades, particularly when we're talking very large changes, like, for example, a change away from proof of work. Knowing how many nodes are on the network is pretty important. for those kind of changes and that kind of planning.
Okay, so more so like a status page for the state of the nodes and things. I think there was a grant, I don't think it was Ziggurat, it was something like Observatory or maybe one of their early projects that was doing a form of this. I don't know how it, landed.
Yeah,
but yeah,
Zcash
for what it's
Observatory.
worth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we restart those conversations. So yeah, totally agree. Having a board like that would be extremely useful. It's been on the wish list for a while. And I think other folks have tried with just node counts and they're not as useful. As most folks know, they don't really tell the whole tale.
Yeah, we really should be more organized about this thing because we might get an attacker who actually knows what they're doing.
Well, if you keep taunting them, we probably will. Just kidding.
I half want to see an attack like that because it would keep us on our toes and it would we'd actually have to fix some of the DOS problems.
Well, I'm pretty sure Taylor's head just hit the keyboard when you said that. So,
Are we just honeypotting at this point? Jeez.
I think so, yeah. Right. Yeah, okay. All right. Taylor, your hands, is it still, do you have another question or was it?
Would you mind if I shared my screen and showed what the Tor metrics look like?
No, that'd be great.
Would that be helpful to people?
Oh, yeah, sure, go for it. That'd be cool.
Right, I found the right button. It's different. And now it doesn't want to let me share a window. That's all right. I will make it full screen. There we go. So can people see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So to give you an idea, probably the most similar metric that Tor has is the number of relays. So the number of servers that are involved in maintaining the network. And then as they sort of started with this graph and then went on to add, as you can see, about 10 different varieties of different graphs, which is easy to do once you have the initial data there. Something that Tor also does is user estimates, but in a privacy preserving way. So they have a number of different ways to look at that. This is by IP address, but estimated and anonymized. And then there's also a way of estimating the number of users in the applications section that's by the number of downloads of the software. So probably the things that we would have been looking at, maybe would have been useful in the last few weeks, would be traffic. So we might not be looking at the amount of data transferred here. We might be looking instead at the number of transactions or the number of transactions of particular types. And one of the features of these graphs is that they show over time. A lot of block explorers just show very recent information. So it's really useful to be able to see a history and to say, oh, it's been pretty stable, but maybe went up a bit about a month ago. And then they had some researchers work on performance graphs. And so this is actually some researchers that I worked with on another project, and then it was adopted into the official metrics website where they look at the latency of various, in this case, downloading files. So we might be looking at the latency of fetching blocks or fetching other data. So that just gives you an idea of what that's like. Does anybody have any questions about that? I can talk about specific metrics if people are particularly interested. I'll just link to this in the chat as well.
Cool. All right, very good.
Well, I might stop sharing and let someone else talk for a while.
Okay. All right, thank you, Taylor. That looks really cool. That'd be a great kind of joint project, if you will, or maybe it could just feed off a combination of like observed metrics and things that, I don't know, maybe even test status or something we could work in there and expand it a little bit. It looks really good.
The other thing that I would like a visualization of is connectivity in the Zcash network. So there's been some research done on that for Bitcoin, but it's one of these things where the paper authors have their own software that they don't publish, and the results are not really reproducible. But if we had sort of a live display of that, that would be really interesting.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about using something like Privio or one of those kinds of things to collect that, those kinds of metrics in a way that full nodes and other people can sort of opt into providing that kind of data. But as with everything, it's the time. Although nowadays at the same time, I think when we were talking about it, a lot of those libraries were also relatively early in sort of their deployments and life cycles, whereas now we have like pretty wide scale, like big tech company production deployments of some of these private metrics systems. So it's likely easier to do that kind of setup and integration now than it was 3-4 years ago.
It is, but also there are some things that don't need to block on that, because if you're just displaying some view of the network that an attacker would definitely have anyway, I don't see any big privacy problem with doing that.
Yeah, so I 2 jobs ago, I was actually working on privacy preserving statistics for Tor, and yeah, there were definitely some statistics like, say, bandwidth amounts, because those are actually triggered by users that we wanted to hide, and other statistics like the number of nodes, which is publicly available on the network, and so the privacy constraints are much lower.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where like, the number of nodes we find, the ways in which nodes are connected is more the sort of thing that I would want to be careful
you don't
about.
want it, even if it's in principle public information, you don't want to make it too easy for an attacker.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, very good. Anyone have anything else they wanted to bring up, or a question or comment on any topic we covered today? Nope, looks like we're all set. Okay, well, we'll give some time back. Good seeing everyone again, and thanks for all the comments and input. Were you about to say something there?
Reminder to vote in
vote.
Zcash, you're eligible.
Yep. Yes.
And bear in mind that you can vote multiple times and only your last vote will count. So if
vote early, vote often.
Vote early, vote often. Yeah.
But if you do vote often, make sure your last vote is the one you really want to count. So all right, very good. All right, well, everyone, have a good rest of the day and a good weekend if we don't chat before, and we'll catch up in Discord. Take you later.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.